I'm going on with EuroMOMO, and what I'm showing here are other graphics from EuroMOMO that are about excess children mortality accumulated over the whole year of 2021. And that is, what it means is, in 2021, the dark blue line is for 2021, and it is that the excess mortality for children in Europe, as covered by EuroMOMO, is almost 600 children. So what you get is an excess in children mortality that starts again in late spring 21. So the excess mortality was actually very low. So excess means you take the number of dead and you for that year at that moment, and you subtract from it the average number of dead at the same period for previous years. Let's say 3 or 5 previous years. And up to, let's say, April 21, this number was negative, and it was decreasing. In 21, children were dying less than on average the previous years. And maybe, I don't know that, because they don't say that in EuroMOMO, maybe they didn't include 2020 at the time. But so they compare it to previous years, and you see that 2021 has fewer deaths. And then it starts, there still is a lower than average death rate, but it starts increasing. So there are more and more deaths. And that means around April 21. And that's the time that children 12 to 14, which are included in the EuroMOMO age class, are started being injected. So this change, this shift here, that then it starts going up, is actually at the time that you start injecting a small fraction of the children in Europe.
So what's the date on that? I can't read that on the chart, where the blue line crosses the dotted line. So where it goes from negative
well, that
to
must be September. And remember,
September.
many children got injected for entering classes. Ages 12, 13, and 14 are already being injected in Europe. Maybe at first not so much, but during late summer, yes, because this was like some kind of semi-condition for entering classes. That's what I understand. So now these are the data as they stood in 2022, and I had that screenshot. But in 2024, 1.5 years ago, by chance, look at the same stuff, and now it's different colors. So red is 2021, and gray is 22, and yellow wasn't there in the previous graph, is 2023. And you see it's the excess mortality over the year, each of the different years, and you see that the excess deaths for children for 2021 is 113 children. And that's in, again, April 20 or May 24. And then even late, but also at another period earlier, so let's say that's March 24, you see that the excess mortality for children in 21 is minus 187. So according to the date, you get totally different results. I got all kinds of results, but in 22, this result was very clear. So what it means is there is an a posteriori change in the data that apparently results from the change in the calculations for the baseline. So you compare your excess mortality versus an average, and apparently the sampling for these averages change. So the average is a kind of modeling, of course, but you change the data that you use for the modeling as you go on with time. So maybe you use a posteriori data, like to predict what happens in 21, you use data from 22 or 23. I don't know what they do, but everything is changed.
So it looks like they used their modeling and whatever data they used to calculate this excess mortality in order to make these excess deaths disappear. Because if you go back up to the screenshot that you took in for the data published into, So this, what we see here, is a screenshot you took back in the year 2022, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and good for you that you did that. So this is the screenshot from 2022. This is no longer visible. This is gone now. If you go and you look at the data that is now published in 2024, it shows you an excess mortality of 113, which before was 592. It's a huge difference.
And 2 months earlier or 3 months earlier, you had actually an excess mortality of minus 187 for 21. It depends when you look at it.
So who knows what it's going to look like in 3 months or in a year?
Or today. I mean,
or today. Well,
because I didn't check it.
What do you suppose? So, well, I mean, this is ridiculous. How can you work with data that change all the time?
Well, that's the technique, right? It is about confusing people. I mean, it's not only about misrepresenting in a specific way, in a biased way. It's also simply putting out a lot of different data, of different stuff, maybe, or if possible, contradictory. So it's not only about making you believe things are good or things are bad, the vaccine works, doesn't work, and so on. It's also about it's more about confusing people, which is what today we see. People are not working. I mean, intellectually and mentally, they are not working. They are confused at a lot of different levels. And it comes from contradictory stuff, which can be explained by modeling uses in 25, the data up to 25, and the modeling in 22 uses only, it's the same model, but uses only data up to 22. And that can make a lot of different things, and they are not telling you that. And you have to be very careful. I mean, I found this by chance.
That's right. Plus, they can always hide behind their expert status and say, "Well, you don't understand all this complicated modeling that we are doing here. You just have to trust whatever data we throw at you." But when you see this kind of change, then you understand what kind of game they are playing here, right?
Exactly. No, but yeah, of course. As I said, these changes can go in every direction, and maybe they are controlling it or not. I don't know, but they certainly are using the fact that they are confusing you and themselves.
Well, I think, I don't know how they came up with this minus 187 a few months ago. Maybe they decided that was a little bit too much of an too much, and people wouldn't believe it, and so they adjusted it to 113. That makes it more believable. But I think it is being controlled, because otherwise you wouldn't consistently see the movement towards decreasing the harms. If you would show me data published in 2024 that show like 1,000 children accumulated excess mortality for 2021, well, that would be interesting. But it's always in the other direction,
and you're
lessening the harm.
You also see it here, because for 2022, the excess mortality in N 2022 was 1,371 children in Europe. That's a huge number, of course.
Yeah.
And it's even more. That's over twice the rate in 21. But when you repeat this in 24, so this is the gray data, 22 here, you're a bit lower. You are at 1,100 excess deaths 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it for 3 months earlier in 24, you don't see it, but you are about 200 excess deaths for 2020. Sorry. 2000. Oh, I didn't put 2022 at the time. Sorry. So we don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my fault. Anyways, you see there are changes. You simply see it, and you're right, there is a tendency to decrease it, but it can be related to the modeling, because if the modeling uses something like an average, and your average after COVID and the shocks increased, so your modeling, your average is higher, so the excess at the point you're looking is lower.
Yeah, well, but that's a very questionable way to do it, because you just take the deaths from the shots and use them as your new normal baseline, if I understand that correctly, and then say, oh well, measured compared to that, our axis is pretty low. That's just the ultimate fraud.
It is, but in a strictly scientific way, you want to predict. Your modeling is about predicting the deaths, and as you compare your observation with your prediction, and you do not predict something by using ulterior data. You do not predict what is going to happen in 21 by using data from 22, 3, and 4. I don't know if that's what they do, but I assume that's what that it's likely something like that. That's not a predictive model.
No.
You do not predict something based on later data. That's not the way it works. You have to use previous data. And it also, again, the confusion can even be with the very people that do the prediction. Think, because I'm used to so-called scientists. They are very able to be confused about prediction and cause and effect stuff, right? And taking data from 22 to predict data from 21, there is a problem here. That they can do it without actually understanding that it's false. They do a lot of falsities, false stuff, not only because they are dishonest, but because their mind is not working well, like other people, basically. The next result that I had, which was very interesting, and that was in 22, I found data from the CDC that was per state excess mortality rates per state, all-cause mortality rates. It's basically the increase in mortality in 21 compared to 2019 and 22, the average per state. So the horizontal line, the gray small line here, is 0. So there wouldn't be no excess mortality. And you see that almost...
Hervé, can you click on viewer again?
Sorry, my fault again. So this one
is much better.
So you see here, this line here, 0 means no excess mortality. And 49 out of 50 states have excess mortality. That's in 21. It's a result. And each dot, blue or orange, is a different state. Now, that's the excess mortality, all-cause mortality, is your vertical line, y-axis. And your x-axis, the horizontal line, is the number of death reports in VAERS for at least one COVID injection per 100,000 individual in that state. And what you find is a positive correlation between the all-cause mortality rate and the VAERS COVID injection mortality rate for that state, with two different groups of states, the orange and the blue ones, which I don't know what it means. And I tried to find out, but I never found out. But what it means is basically the VAERS death rate that suspects COVID injections is predicting the total all-cause mortality excess death rate in 21. It basically suggests that most of the excess deaths in 21 are due to the COVID injections. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that positive correlation. Now, the question was, why do we have two groups of states? And I never found out. I suspect, and that's going to affect the next analysis that I'm doing, I suspect that it had something to do about administrative care about the data in VAERS or in the different states. Like some states publish faster, others less fast, or the VAERS publishes faster for some states than other states. I don't know.
So this is really interesting. for the orange dots, you show the state. You show each state. For the blue dots, you didn't put which state it is. But let's have a look here. For example, I live in New York, and I see New York is all the way down there in the left bottom corner with few VAERS deaths reported, and a few increase in all-cause mortality rates. And New Jersey is even below the line. This is the only state that's below the line. So
you see that that cluster is regional. It's all the
Massachusetts, Rhode Island,
Massachusetts.
Right. So I would say, so for New York,
Maine.
MA is Massachusetts, I think.
Sorry.
ME is Maine and MA is Massachusetts.
I'm very sorry that.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. Oh, in New York, think depending on where you live, there are probably big regional, and Albert Benavides from VAERSaware, whom you know and with whom you have worked, he would know that, I think. But there probably are big regional differences in how many VAERS reports are actually submitted after vaccine harms. Because in New York, I'm sure there should be way more VAERS reports than there apparently are submitted. And the same for New Jersey.
I agree, but actually, so I showed this graphic to a lot of people, and some people, another guy who works with me is in Texas, but he's a Brit. He put me into contact with Albert Benavides, and that's in 2023. And I didn't know about Albert Benavides, which you also, of course, interviewed.
Right.
I spoke with Albert, and the first thing that he told me was, look, there is a lot of missing data in a VAERS form. And so here you have an example of a VAERS form, and it shows you that there are missing data. For example, in the form, it's the standard form, there is age, and there is no data here. It says it's male and location is foreign. Everything here can be missing, including what COVID vaccine it is and so on, what dose it is and so on. But if you go into the write-up, meaning the case description, you find that it concerns a 2-year-old male. So you have so actually the age is in the form, but it's not at the location where you should have age. And when you look at the CDC summary of the ages of people who got effects from whatever vaccine, including COVID, of course, that child will not be included.
Mm-hmm. And that's right. Age unknown, right? Yeah. And that's the reason is, the almost all the fields on the VAERS submissal form are optional. So you don't have to put the age. You don't have to put, there's barely anything you have to put. And that's why it is possible to submit reports like that, where important fields like age are empty.
But the information is in the text, which is interesting.
Correct.
So what Albert did, and this is a huge effort about a lot of years, this is his site today, not today, but in the last time. And this is after I told him, after we did the work in 2023 together, I told him, Albert, you add also the other VAERS reports, not only the COVID vaccine reports. And he did that. But so here you have all the reports that are in this VAERS CDC, and it's like almost 7 million reports. And the bar graphs that you see here, and yes, I'm going to increase it. The bar graphs that you see is the events as they are written, categorized in the CDC report, in the VAERS report. So there is a level of severity. Sometimes it's missing, and sometimes it's 1.7 million times out of 2.7 million times that is missing. And then there is a given level of severity: office visit, emergency hospitalization, life threat, birth defect, permanent disability, and death. And that's increasing severity, of course. Now, when you use what Albert did with other people, and it's some kind of AI programming that basically reads the text that I showed you before and finds out if there is missing or contradictory information compared to the missing data in the right location of the form, you're going to find, and that's what he called ethically clean. You will see the none of the above, like missing information on the severity, decreases from 1.7 million to 660,000. And all the other categories, of course, increase. When you look also at age data, so here is the original age data, and the total unknown ages are over 700,000 for the 2.6 million, with whatever for the various age categories. And then after correcting, like for that young child, which is German, by the way, 2 years old boy who died, you see changes in the values here. And so you go from unknown age 730,000 to unknown age 315,000. So less than half again.
Huge difference.
Yes.
And an enormous amount of work to do that, to suck the data out of the written part. And all this data could have been easily been captured if these fields, like the age field and the I don't know what the name of the field is where you say if it's an office visit or hospital, etc. If these fields had been mandatory, it's as simple as that. It's absolutely basic stuff for anybody who has ever done a survey, to have certain fields that you need to have for your analysis to make them mandatory. That's how you get the data. The fact that this is not being done on the VAERS form, also on this vaccine adverse event reporting system, means that they do not want to collect data that is meaningful, that really tells you what is going on. There cannot be any other explanation for it.
I do agree with what you're saying. And more than that, the next analysis that I did strengthened that. And that was, I looked at the changes in the percentage of reports. That's not the one. You saw these two column graphs or these two tables with for correcting basically what he calls ethically cleaning and after. And you do the ratio between the two for the frequency of that event for that age class. And here we have the children, and I only show in big for males, but for young girls, it's on the other side, and it looks very similar, so I didn't make it big. So you see that the ratio between before and after cleaning is quite similar for no event. And the more severe the event, the worse it gets. But for two categories of vaccines, orange COVID vaccines and blue non-COVID vaccines, and you basically see that there is no real trend for the non-COVID vaccines. Maybe there is, but probably not. But for the COVID vaccines, the more severe it is, the worse it gets. I mean, the bias in the missing data increases the more severe the effect of the vaccine was. On the other hand, and I'm not showing that here, when you look at older ages, it's the opposite. For old people, when it's death, you don't have a bias, but for office visits, you have a big bias. So it's exactly opposite. And it's as if, because we don't know if there is intention, but the result of all these biases, which are non-random, that's why we could think it's intentional, is to hide the harm, the severe harms of these vaccines for children.
Yeah, this is a pretty shocking graph here. So death, what is it, like 10 times, something like that, compared to
Almost
the
10 times,
non-COVID?
yes.
Yeah, something
For
like
birth
that.
defects, yes.
And then look at the birth defects. So, in the United States. I don't know what it was like in Luxembourg, but in the United States, I remember how totally shocked I was when very early on, maybe it was even in the fall of 2021, the shots were permitted for pregnant women. That was just absolutely unheard of. For pregnant women, they should get the COVID mRNA shots. As we know, as a consequence, a lot of pregnancies were miscarried. A lot of fetal deaths to this day, increase in fetal deaths, and also in children born with birth defects.
Here,
How
remember, these are not real life data. This is a bias in
right?
administrative handling of reports, right? Even if it apparently reflects something that you just said that is a real phenomenon, it's
Yeah,
basically saying the administrative handling is such that it hides as much as it can
yeah,
these real life phenomena. And here you have a similar analysis, which costed me at the time in 23 a huge amount of efforts, which is in the delay inverse between publication and submission. So the report is submitted, and then there is time until publication of the report in CDC. And what you see is that the delay, the percentage of reports that had a delay of over a month was higher for severe effects in children than for simple office visit in children. But for older people, in this case, I showed, for example, 40 to 45 years old, it's the opposite. No delay or low, rare delays for death and a high delay for a simple office visit. So this is basically called what Albert calls peddling, I think, if I'm right. And it's not so. If it was a true administrative thing about how they handle it, you should see the same thing, first of all, for any severity level, and certainly for the same severity levels, whatever age it is. So it's so complex. The structure of these biases is so complex. It's affected by age, it's affected by severity rank, it's for missing data, it's for publication delay. This is so complex that it always goes in the same direction, hiding for children.
these are beautiful graphs here, and they are so telling. If you look at this children graph, 0 to 5 years old, I mean, in the United States, as elsewhere, the death of a young child, like between 0 and 5 years, is a absolutely devastating event. And if you can prove causality between the mRNA shot and the death, then that becomes known. That will send a very strong signal to parents not to get their kids vaccinated with this mRNA shot. Parents will not do it. So you have a really strong incentive. If it's not your goal to save the citizens' lives, then you have a very strong incentive to hide that, to hide it as long as you can. And when you see the death, I mean, it's just a complete outlier up there in the right upper corner, up to how many percentage reports? It's like 90% for 80% for females, right? 80% for females, and it's death. Death is the worst, and below that, it's way less. It's way less
But
delay in the publication.
it's still, I mean, it's birth defects, but no, sorry,
Birth
permanent
defects.
disability. But
Okay.
that's a very bad thing when you are so young.
Very bad.
And
Yeah.
it's still, on average, if you take females and males, it's on average 30% of long delays.
Yes.
And that's only the publication. But what it means, the delay will make that if you look at different periods, you will get different results. That's the same story that I told you with EuroMOMO.
Right.
So maybe some parent will hear something at one point and then 2 months later at another point. So he will be confused and then he will simply go with the authorities. And that's the technique.
It's so nefarious. It's so democidal, to withhold information from the population that the shots are causing death, that they are deadly for many people and for kids as well. to withhold that on purpose. I mean, when you look at this, there's no doubt about it that this is by design. This is not some sort of accident.
So remember, I published that in, I don't know, in summer 23. Remember
Yeah.
that part. And I did 2 studies, one for delays and one for missing data in age. Okay. And I think I also did one with missing data for sex, but it might be that I put 2 missing informations together in the same publication, all on ResearchGate. But these things have been barely looked at. So you get, I don't know because I didn't check, but if I have 500 or even 1,000 reads for these publications, that's a lot.
Which is nothing. I mean,
Exactly.
that should,
I mean,
millions of people should read that and
that
should see this.
everyone, that's so strange, right? Each one of my publications, also this one, should have seen millions of people. And there were only 2 publications among those who got millions of looks of reads. The first one about about the Israeli data in winter 21, and then another one that we will describe a bit later.
Hervé, that was great information and really profound findings from your own investigations and research that you shared here. I think we call it a day for today, and we are going to continue this because there is so much more in your deck here, so much more findings and analysis that you have done, that we have to come back to it and look at all the other things. What do you think?
Well, of course, I'll do what you tell me, and the next point that we are going to look at are new data that I have not yet published. What you have seen until now, and also a large part of what afterwards we will show, is stuff that I have published, but the next thing that was in line to describe are still unpublished results from the very last weeks. Yes.
Oh, wow, that's exciting.
Very gladly we'll do that.
Okay. Oh, absolutely. Let's do that. And let's do that soon. And I also, when we talk again, I also would like you to talk more about the shedding, because you have written about the shedding effects. So that's very interesting as well.
But that's part of the stuff that I'm going to show.
Oh, perfect. Good. Then we can, excellent. Thank you so much, Hervé.
Yes, great. Thank you also to you.